it's really quite interesting because I associate, the ability to be sort of simpatico with the boat in the single particularly, and not be brutal with it. That's one of the things that makes a fast single sculler. But you are an extremely fast single sculler. So I'm trying to reconcile what you're saying.
Yeah, well, I think I think part of it is I think I would say that I am more comfortable in the single just naturally. Like I'd say I'm closer to good rowing in the single and in sculling, I think, than sweeping. But and I think part of that is in high school when we were sweeping, it was almost all eights, and then when we were sculling in high school, it was single, double, quad, whatever, and then I was in a single over the summer for a few summers, obviously. But I think it's all relative, right? Like I think I'm not saying I think I'm a bit better than a novice sweeper, but I'm definitely not the best sweeper in the country or in the world as far as technique goes. So I think it's all relative, right? I think relative for me, I think I'm more comfortable in sculling, but I'm trying to go to the Olympics sweeping. So that's what I've been focusing on, is trying to get up to speed as quickly as possible sweeping and sweeping at a really high level, which I haven't really done up until 2019.
Yeah. Did you ever have like a dream of going to Tokyo in a single, or was it always, no, I'm definitely, it's not my time yet, I'm definitely going to sweep?
Well, I remember it must have been my sophomore year of high school. So like in 2016, the fall of 2016, or whenever they announced that Tokyo was going to be 2020, it was going to be in Tokyo. Yeah. I remember my brother saying like, "Oh, it's in Tokyo, like can't wait to go to Tokyo." He was saying it as a joke, or he wasn't saying it as a joke, but I was taking it as a joke. I was like, yeah, like, okay, I'll be there by like when I'm like 20 or whatever. And then, it started to become more and more realistic with results and ergs and whatnot. But I think it's, I've thought about going in the single, of course, not strictly Tokyo, but absolutely at some point I want to do a campaign in the single. I think it just kind of made sense as the details and as the timeline shortened and approached. It just made sense for me to go and try to make a camp boat where there are, with an 8-4 and a pair, there's 14 seats compared to a single, there's one, and I have to kind of juggle, the disciplines of sculling and sweeping during my freshman year, then go to trials and miss some school, miss some racing with Harvard to qualify as the American, and then go and qualify the single for the Olympics. It was a much bigger ask, I think.
Yeah. So I'm just thinking, because the Olympics have been postponed. No, maybe first I could ask you, because it's a long way down the track now. Were you really frustrated when you heard that postponement announcement, or was that? I know now, it is what it is, and we talked about that before we went live. But take me back to that time where it was in doubt and you weren't sure. What was your reaction?
Yeah, I think when the virus first started really becoming a thing, and there was talk of them postponing it, people were saying, "Oh, it could go either way." Like they could really see Japan, being strict about it and sticking to it. And then I remember one day because at first Japan and the IOC was saying it's going on no matter what. And then one day the IOC said, we're going to start to investigate what it would potentially look like to move it. And they worded it just about like that, just as verbatim as that. And I heard that and I was like, it's over. Like, they're not going to backtrack from that, right? Like, they're just going to say that and they're going to say, well, we're going to investigate what it looks like to move it a year. And then we're going to, and I knew that, like, I just had a feeling from then. And that was, less than a week out of when they actually announced it. And, obviously I was upset, but what I always say is I think I got off, relatively speaking, a lot easier than, these other guys who have been putting their lives on hold for one last shot, or these other women who have been putting their lives on hold for one last shot at it. This was just going to be my first attempt to get there of hopefully many. I think as far as that goes, it's not like it was no question to me whether like, oh, well, so is this it for me? No, like I'm just going to keep training. How can I get there now at 2021 and be the fastest as possible in 2021?
What is it about you and your relationship, your love for the sport, that wants you to do it not just for the Tokyo Olympics, but, in the foreseeable future Olympic campaigns? What is it about that?
Yeah, well, I don't know how much of it is the the sport itself, as much as being involved with something that it's really easy to measure your progress, I'd say, and it's straightforward and it's extremely satisfying, obviously, to get better and win races. And I love racing, and I love rowing and racing with friends, against friends, or against people I don't know. And then the sport itself is, given me so many incredible opportunities, from, trying for the Olympics to being able to go to Harvard and row at Harvard with like such a rich program with so much tradition there. I think it's just been, it's definitely been the best thing I've ever been involved with in my life.
Yeah. That's really interesting. It's really heartening, for the sport to hear somebody like you is thinking about, more of a long-term future, which is, as you say, is different to maybe some models of American athletes in the past.
Yeah, well, I think for me, it's a lot easier, like I was saying too, because I still have 3 more years of school, right? So even if I wrote off 2021, it would be going back to school for 3 years, graduating in 2023, and then it's 1 more year to the Olympics. So there's no way I'm not going to try that, right?
Yeah.
I'm not going to go for it again, at least 1 more time.
Yeah. I was talking with Matt Smith, who's the executive director of FISA, last week, and he was suggesting the Olympics were going to be potentially quite different. The World Cup events next year, they're planning without spectators, and there's also the potential for the Olympics or for Tokyo to be careful about which countries they let athletes in from. I just wonder, with the infection rate so high in parts of America, if that's something that you've either been across or it's concerned you at all?
Yeah, as far as the spectators go, I think we're lucky, I guess, that rowing is not a spectator sport, and there's not a lot of excitement as far as that goes, other than this really small, tight-knit community. But from the idea of not letting people in from various countries, I think it's really early to it doesn't hurt anybody by them saying that, but I think it's really early to worry about that. Who knows what it's going to be like in 10 months from now or 9 months from now. And I can't imagine that they're going to make that call until 9 months from now. Then the other thing is, at the end of the day, I mean, if I could see them, not letting spectators in from America. If we're talking about athletes, okay, why don't you just test us as we land or something?
Yeah.
On a population of athletes where it's totally doable.
Yeah. Talking of that, when are you thinking of going back to the National Training Centre? I mean, have you got a date in mind when you're thinking of crossing over to the West in your van?
Yeah, well, it's been like, I've had an idea of when I was gonna go back, but it's been continually pushed back, because my plan was to wait for the announcement of Harvard of what the fall semester and then next year is going to look like, and that was supposed to be early June initially, if I remember correctly. And they've kind of kicked the can down the road, and we still haven't heard anything. And I think we're supposed to hear again this week, but we still have not heard anything. So I'm not really sure at this point. I was hoping I could, hear what they were going to do at school and kind of plan it out, and whether that meant I was going to go back, go online, be at the training center, be at Harvard, be at home, but there's really been no information. So it's still all just so up in the air.
Yeah. Okay. That's really interesting to hear. I just wonder if I could take you to, you were a very successful junior. We're going to have a look at that, but there's one striking picture of you celebrating an event which I think you still say is, your most favourite in the sport, your favourite memory in the sport, which is the youth nationals in your final year at high school.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, I think that that race, I think the thing about that was that regatta, my senior year, the national regatta, that one was, something that one is legitimately something I'd been working towards for 5.5 years. And, the first time I went, it was at that same course. I was a lightweight, and we got 5th. And then the next year, it was in Sarasota. I was in the heavyweight 8, and then we got 7th. And then we got 3rd, and then we got 3rd again. And then by the senior year, I was like, I'm not going to let anyone outwork me. I'm not going to let any team outwork our team. And, the commitment that all 9 of us had in that boat was just, from the first day of spring season, we said we're either going to get first or we're going to have raced so hard someone is going to have passed out and died, and we're going to get dead last. I said, I don't want second. We're either getting first or last. I don't care. Like, I'm sorry. There are too many seniors in this boat who've been working towards it for, legitimately 5.5, 6 years, that we're either going to win or we're going to get last. And, that's what we did. And we raced, that was the most aggressive, straightforward, determined racing I've ever been a part of, honestly, even though, I've obviously rode at higher levels since, but it was the best way ever to end a high school career that I wouldn't trade for anything.
So are you gesturing to the crowd, the spectators, to yourself? I mean, was that just an impulsive, it's very attractive as a commentator, when you see guys stand up in the boat. I can remember the Norwegian double did that very famous picture of them in 2013, I think, or one of them anyway. It's great to see as a commentator, but had you planned it? Did it just come out all of a sudden?
Well, I'd say it honestly was not. I think it was planned, and it definitely was not involuntary because I was so tired. But I think it's funny just because I remember my 8th grade year. So my year before high school in 2014, when I was racing there in California as a lightweight, Long Beach was the team that won this event, the heavyweight 8. And It's the first time they'd ever won it. It's the last time they'd ever won it. And the guy who won stood up, and, the guy in there, like multiple people stood up, jumped in, whatever. And I remember at the time, no one had done that in like youth rowing before. And it was like this big thing. And then in 2015, Oakland Strokes won, a guy stood up. 2016, Oakland Strokes won, a guy stood up. 2017, Newport won, a guy stood up. And then at that point, I'm like, okay, if we win, like, we all got to stand up. It's the tradition, And I think it's funny because, people, some people like it, some people hate it, and they're like, oh, what, like, don't stand up. It's supposed to be like a gentlemanly sport. I'm like, okay, it's a gentlemanly sport, but we also had a female coxswain who stood up. We also had 4 other people in the boat stand up, and at the end of the day, it's a high school sport. You don't think, a football team that wins nationals is going to be obnoxious about it. Like, get some, I think it makes the sport interesting.
Personally, I love it. It does make the sport interesting. I love to see that. You went to juniors quite early. I remember seeing your crew in the quadruple sculls in 2016 at Rotterdam, where you medalled, which is a pretty decent result for a 16-year-old. And then one thing I wanted to ask you: you went in the single scull in 2017, and also you went in the Cox 4, and I couldn't understand why you would enter in 2 events at the same championships. Like, why being in the Cox 4 would detract from the single scull, which, did you think you had a chance of winning? Why was that decision?
So I think the idea behind that pretty much started in 2016, where in our quad, we had 3 guys from Sarasota who had all primarily swept the season before, in the 8, which we got 3rd in that year at Youth Nats. So we were all pretty competent sweepers at compared to a junior standard. And then, our Bassi was also a great rower. He wasn't too comfortable sweeping, but, when we had finished the quad race and we were standing on shore watching the 8, in that year, the USA got 2nd, and it was a photo finish. It was 0.0 something. And I remember thinking, I was like, God, 3 of the guys from the quad could have jumped in there, and, in theory, we could have done better and won it. And I was, talked to the coach, talked to the guys, and the thing about the 8, right, at the World Championships is you race twice if everything goes well. You have the heat and the final. And it wouldn't make sense to do, a quad and a single where both events have a ton of entries. You're racing 2 times a day for 5 days straight. But a quad and an 8 would make sense. But, because it's one race the first day, then you do the quad, then there's one day where you have 2 finals. So I think knowing that is when I kind of started to think, like, next year I'd really like to do the quad and the 8. And then once I started realizing I wanted to do the single and people were suggesting that to me, then the question became, okay, so I'll do quad and 8 or single and 8. But then the single and the 8 are back to back schedule wise. So then I came to a day where I kind of picked between doing, obviously doing trying to make any boat just race that. But in terms of double racing, the two options that made sense schedule wise and amount of racing wise were the single in the Cox 4, which I ended up doing, or the quad in the 8, which is what I thought of doing in 2016. So obviously I picked the single in the Cox 4, and the Cox 4 that year we had a tremendous amount of talent, and we were lightning quick up until the final where we kind of completely flied and died. We went.
You won your heat that year, didn't you?
We won the heat and had we were something off of the other heat, and we didn't even have a good race. And I was like, okay, well, so worst case scenario, we get second or third. And then I remember I was planning. I was like, okay, so I can't go to the medal dock because I have to start warming down for the single. And then the final came, and we just totally had this. I think we had it in our heads where if we weren't down 500 in, we were going to be rock solid, because the whole summer our base and sprint had been just amazing. But right at the end, we got our start really down to a science, and then kind of forgot about that. And then the final, we went 128 or something into a headwind for the first 500, and then just completely blew our wheels off and got passed by everybody. So it was a disappointing finish, but I think we all learned a lot, and it was still a really great experience running with those guys.
That's really interesting to hear you talk about that. And you should say, I mean, for anyone to win the junior single is a massive achievement. I can look back and think of names of some of the sort of winners of the junior single and what they've gone on to achieve in the seniors. How much of a sense of achievement did you have of winning that singles title in 2017?
Yeah, well, I think 2017, I was definitely it was a totally different mindset and set of things that were stressing me out on my shoulders that year, and that lead up to the race, because I was worried how I was, racing a few hours before in the Cox 4, and I knew I was going to put everything on the line then and be totally gassed. But, aside from that, I was racing against a German who was stronger than me and was only rowing the single and definitely spending a lot more time in it than I was. So already on paper, it was looking like it was going to be pretty tough to beat him. And then I remember in the heat, I was going against him. In the heat, 1 through the people who had every medalist in the final, and it was in that first heat.
Oh.
I remember looking at it, and I was like, oh my God, am I about to go to the rep? And that heat, I was just, sitting in 4th or 3rd. I think you needed top 2 or 3, and I was sitting one place back from being able to qualify. 500 meters in or something. And I was like, I can just go. I can just go and see what happens. And then I won that. And I remember literally on the bus ride home, just smiling, literally pinching myself. I was just how did that even happen? Because it was just so unexpected. And then after the Cox 4, it was all about, that 2 hours in between was all about recovery. I had a piece of bread with Nutella on it or something, and did a 30-minute erg cool down, sat there for 30 minutes, did a 30-minute erg warm up, and then went and raced. And that race, going into the final, was pretty clear that it was going to be either me or this German, Moritz Wolff.
Yeah.
And I knew it was going to be either of us. And I knew my start was good, and I didn't want to waste it like I had done in the heat earlier in that week. So I basically just went off the line, sat a couple seconds up on him, and just every stroke, I was just like, okay, just make it to the next 500 in front. Just make it to the next 500 in front. And that was the most spent I've been after a race in a really long time. And it was just totally unexpected from, it's what I hoped for. But if you had asked me a week ago and said, where do you think you're going to go? I'd be like, if I could make a final, I'd be happy, because it would set me up for next year, blah, blah, blah. So I think that was it was a really magical summer for sure. Yeah. The next summer was
talk about the next summer.
Yeah, and then I think the next summer was, it was almost scared, or I was scared I was going to go and lose it, and it was going to be well, what has he been doing this last year? So that my senior year was some of the hardest I've ever worked that whole year, and I think I got faster from at least on the 2K, but especially rowing wise, I got faster from junior to senior year than I did from sophomore to junior. So I think sophomore to junior year, I think I dropped 8 seconds on my 2K, and then I dropped 9 or 10 the next year, even though my 2K was obviously faster. So I was was definitely the hardest I had trained in high school. We were obviously training hard for that 8. And then the second the summer started, there was talk of me. I was thinking about double racing again, but my coach stepped in. He was like, I don't want you to risk messing up your senior year. Just do the single, go as fast as you can, and just, end on a good note. So that's what I did. And it was just the biggest weight off my shoulders in the world, just winning that. And like, okay, no one has severely outworked me and made me look like a fool this year.
Just a couple of things with that race. I just want to take you back to the semi-final of that race. I think I've got a picture of you through the 1,000 meters because it was in track eye. I think is that right? The 2018 championships.
2018 was in Richice. It was in the Czech Republic.
Sorry, no, it's wrong on my list. I've raced on that course, so I remember it. But this is you at 1,000 meters.
Mm-hmm.
3:20 through 1,000 meters in the semi. You're just up on the Australian sculler there. Did you know you were going that quick?
No. So what I thought I messed up, and I just didn't. I thought I somehow messed up the stroke coach, because the stroke coach didn't have, it didn't have average split, and it did not have it because if you have like time in meters, right, you can calculate it as you're rowing. It didn't have one of those, and then it didn't have average split. So I was rowing blind, and I now found out after the regatta was over, my coach did that on purpose because he didn't want me to go and try to retake the record and go harder than I had to win, because
Casey Galvanic.
Yeah. So Casey Galvanic, because the heat I got the new world's best time for the junior single. Then the quarter, I think Moritz Wolff, the German, he took it from me and got the world's best time. And then this one, I was obviously wanting to take it back, and the conditions were, as you can see there, super fast. So, but my coach was worried I was just going to absolutely gut myself going for it. So he changed the stroke coach. I incorrectly assumed I wasn't going to check it right before the race after I had launched. So yeah, I was just rowing, trying to end up in front, not using too much energy, and it ended up being a really fast time. So
6:45. Is a stunning time for any single sculler. It's 6:45 for an 18-year-old. It's like, I believe that's quicker than the under 23 record. Is that right?
At the time, it was in 2019. Someone beat it in Sarasota, so they went point something faster. It's either 6:44, 6:45, and shorter.
Yeah.
So it was beaten, but sadly. So I might have to go get that at some point, or try to go get that at some point.
And in the final, I've got a few pictures of you in the final where you won that second medal. Pretty fast start, ahead of the field, and then through 500 meters, dropping back into third or fourth place. Is that a normal pattern of yours that you raced with?
Well, so I really raced in 2018 different than I did in 2017. And the reason for that was, in 2017, I knew it was me and then Moritz Wolff, the German. And I knew one of us was getting first and one of us was getting second, unless something, crazy happened. So knowing that, I just had a good start, and I went out and I just sat on his bow ball and tried to push away. That in 2018, I knew there were several fast scullers. There was Moritz Wolff, and then there's Cormac, who is the Australian who got second. And I knew they were both quick, and I knew Cormac was going to push and try to get out as fast as he could, because he's always had really fast 1K and 1500. And then I knew Moritz was going to have a much more level racing strategy. So it made the most sense for me to not, fight with one guy for 1500 meters, and then he falls off the pace, and then be like, okay, now this guy's not even tired, and he's going to, it made sense for me to race it like a time trial and keep my head in the boat and race it more like a 6-boat race than just a duel, which I had done the year before.
Yeah. And when Moritz Wolff unfortunately capsized, what was going through your head then?
Well, obviously at first you think like, oh, like what happened? Let's slow down. Let's think about what happened. And then a much larger part of my brain is thinking, okay, nothing's going to, like, rowing, there's nothing happens. Once the race starts, it goes to the end. So then I thought, I don't know, maybe someone else will stop, but I'm going to go as fast as I can and keep going. Don't change anything, and don't end up the way he just has.
So on the finish there, you won by a decent margin from the Australian. Just describe what it's like to win back-to-back junior singles titles, and what does that feel like for you?
Yeah, obviously looking back and having rode it in the 2019 Senior Worlds and trying to make the Olympic team, it's obviously, relatively speaking, a much it's not an incredible achievement, I'd say, but it's definitely the first time I won, it was just total. It was unexpected. It was surprising, and it was like a magical summer. And then 2018 was really satisfying in the way, showing that I had gotten significantly faster. I mean, I broke 7 in, I don't know, multiple times that year where I had never done so before. And it was just satisfying knowing that I really had worked harder than I had ever worked, and I had something to show for it. And just like the nationals, youth nationals in my senior year, it just ended the whole high school career on such a high note.